In the deep swamps of South Florida, where thick sawgrass meets tall cypress trees and the air feels heavy with moisture, the Everglades stretch out like a mysterious maze. It's one of America's most important natural areas, home to countless animals and plants found nowhere else. For generations, creatures like alligators, panthers, and wading birds ruled this place. But in the last 40 years, something foreign has taken over, an invader, brought not by nature but by human carelessness. That invader is the Burmese python, a massive constrictor snake that has nearly destroyed this delicate ecosystem. The story of how the python ended up here began decades ago. In the 1970s and 1980s, these exotic snakes were imported from Southeast Asia and sold as pets. At first, they seemed fascinating and harmless tiny hatchlings that fit in the palm of a hand. People in the Miami area bought them, enchanted by the idea of owning something rare and beautiful. But these snakes don't stay small for long. Within just a few years, they grow into enormous 20-foot-long predators that can weigh over 200 pounds. Once owners realized they couldn't manage such huge, dangerous animals, many made a terrible choice. They simply released them into the wild. By 1979, the first Burmese python had been spotted in the Everglades. These early escapees began breeding quietly, forming a small, wild population. But the real disaster came in 1992 when Hurricane Andrew slammed into Florida. The Category 5 storm destroyed entire neighborhoods, and it also tore apart reptile breeding facilities, releasing hundreds of snakes into the wild. Those already living in the swamps suddenly had company. The mix of released pets and storm-liberated snakes became the foundation of a permanent fast-growing wild python population. The Everglades turned out to be perfect for them. The climate was warm all year. There were no natural predators large enough to threaten them. And food was everywhere: birds, mammals, even alligators. A single female python can lay up to 100 eggs each year, allowing their population to grow faster than anyone could control. Their biology gives them a huge advantage. They hunt using heat sensors in their faces that can detect warm-blooded prey. And their sense of smell helps them track even hidden animals. They're patient, powerful, and perfectly built for ambush hunting. Today, there are tens of thousands of pythons slithering through the Everglades, and they are devastating everything in their path. Small animals like raccoons, rabbits, opossums have nearly disappeared in many areas. Some populations have dropped by over 90%. The pythons eat almost anything they can catch, including bobcats, foxes, and deer. There have even been shocking reports of them battling alligators and winning. The balance of nature that kept this swamp alive is collapsing as the pythons continue to multiply. Stopping them has proven almost impossible. The Everglades cover 1.5 million acres of thick swamp and tangled vegetation. The snakes are nearly invisible, perfectly blending with the mud and plants, and they move mostly at night. Even skilled hunters can spend days searching without finding a single one. The biggest problem isn't killing the snakes, it's finding them. That single challenge has defeated almost every attempt to control their spread. Over the years, officials tried everything. They hired professional hunters, offered rewards, and even held public python challenge competitions, where people from all over came to catch as many snakes as they could for cash prizes. Airboats roared through the swamps, and hunters armed with flashlights and machetes searched for snakes in the dark. The events made headlines, but the results were disappointing. Out of tens of thousands of snakes, hunters captured only a few hundred. The population was simply too large, and the snakes were too well hidden. Scientists realized that chasing the snakes one by one would never work. The pythons were reproducing far faster than humans could remove them. So, they turned to a new idea, the scout snake method. Researchers began capturing male pythons, implanting them with small radio trackers, and releasing them back into the wild. During mating season, the tagged male would go looking for females. When he stopped moving for a long time, researchers knew he had found a group of other snakes called a breeding ball. They could then locate and remove multiple pythons at once. This approach worked well, especially because removing a single large female prevents hundreds of eggs from hatching. In one case, a tracked male led scientists to a 215-pound female carrying 122 eggs. Still, this method had limits. It was expensive, required surgery and tracking equipment, and only worked during the short winter breeding season. The war against the pythons needed something faster, cheaper, more efficient. The next big idea came from studying what the snakes love to eat. Among all the Everglades animals, the marsh rabbit had suffered one of the worst declines. Pythons seemed to favor them above all other prey. So researchers wondered, what if they could use rabbits as bait to lure the snakes out of hiding? At first, they tested the idea by placing live rabbits inside small enclosures in swampy areas. The results were immediate. The pythons came. The presence of rabbits attracted snakes that were otherwise nearly impossible to find. For scientists desperate to protect the ecosystem, this seemed like a breakthrough. But there was a dark side. Using live animals as bait brought serious ethical problems. Caring for the rabbits in Florida's extreme heat and humidity was difficult, and many died before the snakes even appeared. When news spread that some of these rabbits had been eaten alive, animal rights groups were furious. Organizations like PETA called the method cruel and unacceptable. Even many scientists felt uneasy about sacrificing one species to save another. Eventually, the idea was abandoned not because it didn't work, but because it crossed a moral line. Yet, this experiment taught researchers something crucial. The pythons could be fooled by the mere illusion of a rabbit. They didn't need real animals, just something that looked, moved, and smelled real. If they could create an artificial rabbit that mimicked all the signals of life, they could lure the snakes without causing harm. That's when the concept of the robo rabbit was born. Designing the robo rabbit was a technological challenge unlike any other. The goal was to create a decoy so realistic that it could trick a massive predator that relies on sight, smell, and heat detection. Scientists from the University of Florida began experimenting with materials that could survive the swamp's harsh environment, heat, humidity, and standing water. They started with toy rabbits, removing the stuffing and replacing it with electronics. But it wasn't enough for the decoy to look like a rabbit. It had to act like one. Inside each robo-rabbit, small motors were added to make subtle movements, tiny ear twitches, a nervous shuffle, or a gentle shake, just enough to make a python believe it was watching live prey. These small random motions are exactly what attract hunting snakes. The war against the Burmese python in Florida's Everglades has entered a new era where science and technology work hand in hand to save a fragile ecosystem. When a python is detected, the new system immediately sends a GPS alert to field teams, giving human experts a chance to act fast before the camouflage snake disappears into the swamp. This real-time alert system has finally solved one of the biggest problems faced by hunters for decades: the near impossibility of finding these snakes in such vast and dense wetlands. Getting these advanced robotic lures into the remote and wild Everglades took careful planning and innovation. The robo-rabbits are equipped with solar panels and rechargeable batteries, allowing them to operate for weeks without human assistance. This was an essential feature since the Everglades is a vast wilderness with no power sources or infrastructure. The first major trial was launched by the South Florida Water Management District, which deployed around 120 of these high-tech rabbits, each costing roughly $4,000 across known python hotspots. These areas were chosen based on years of research, tracking, and observation, places where snakes had been seen hunting or nesting before. For scientists and wildlife officials, The arrival of the robo rabbit marked a major shift in the fight against the python invasion. It gave them a reason to be cautiously hopeful after decades of disappointment. The deployment went smoothly, and the technology worked better than anyone expected. Within days, the first alerts came in, showing that the robotic decoys were successfully drawing out hidden pythons. But then something unexpected happened. The camera feeds began recording behavior that no one had anticipated, strange reactions from the snakes that made. Researchers questioned everything they thought they knew about python instincts. At first, many of the snakes attacked the decoys immediately, striking with their usual speed and precision. But others behaved differently. Some circled the decoys cautiously, while others sat beside them for several minutes without attacking. In some cases, the pythons simply moved away, abandoning the hunt altogether. When this footage began circulating online, it sparked a viral theory that spread quickly. People claimed that the snakes were learning. The idea of a giant reptile adapting and outsmarting human technology fascinated the public. News headlines suggested that the pythons were evolving beyond instinct and beginning to recognize fake prey. The story of the intelligent python spread widely, fueling both awe and fear. However, scientists working on the ground were quick to correct this misconception. They explained that pythons, while impressive predators, do not possess the kind of intelligence or problem-solving skills needed to learn in that way. Their behavior is guided by instinct and environmental cues like heat, movement, and scent. What appeared to be learning was most likely a response to other factors, such as increased human activity near the testing sites or minor flaws in the robots themselves. Pythons are extremely sensitive to vibrations and movement in their surroundings. The process of checking and maintaining the robo-rabbits might have been alerting them to the presence of humans, making them more cautious. Changes in weather or shifts in the natural availability of prey could also have affected their hunger and hunting behavior. So, the mystery of the smart python turned out to be a misunderstanding born from human imagination rather than scientific reality. Still, this episode showed how easily public perception can influence real scientific projects. Despite the false alarm, the experiment provided scientists with something far more valuable than expected: massive amounts of data. Every robo-rabbit's camera recorded detailed information about python movement, preferred hunting grounds, and environmental conditions. This data helped create real-time maps of the snake's behavior across different parts of the Everglades. Even when no pythons were captured, the information being collected offered priceless insight into how the snakes live and move. What began as a simple trap evolved into a complex surveillance network capable of revealing secrets about one of the world's most elusive predators. But beyond the scientific breakthroughs, the human side of the fight remains just as important. The war against the python isn't only about technology, it's also about endurance, emotion, and moral struggle. Hunting pythons is not a sport. It's a physically demanding and mentally draining mission. The swamps are hot, humid, and crawling with danger. Hunters spend long nights moving slowly through waist-deep water, scanning every shadow for signs of movement. The work is exhausting and stressful because the snakes are experts at hiding. Even the most experienced hunters can go for days without finding one. When a python is finally discovered, the situation becomes instantly dangerous. Although they aren't venomous, their size and strength make them powerful opponents. A full-grown python can be more than 20 feet long and weigh over 200 pounds. They can strike quickly and constrict with crushing force. Catching one safely requires skill, calm nerves, and experience. Yet the hardest part for many hunters isn't the capture, it's the aftermath. Program rules require that captured pythons be euthanized in a humane and ethical way. This ensures that the snake's suffering is minimized, but for many hunters, it's emotionally painful. Some of them genuinely admire these animals for their strength and beauty, even while knowing that killing them is necessary to protect Florida's native wildlife. The conflict between admiration and duty weighs heavily on many of them. But for others, especially military veterans, the hunt has become something much more meaningful. Programs like Swamp Apes, which recruit veterans suffering from PTSD, have found surprising therapeutic benefits in the python hunts. For veterans used to operating under extreme pressure, the Everglades offer a place where their hyper-alertness becomes an advantage. Their training helps them stay calm under stress and focused on detail, making them incredibly skilled at spotting the nearly invisible snakes. For many of these veterans, the hunt provides a sense of purpose and community. The physical challenge and the teamwork involved help them heal from trauma. The mission gives them a reason to focus, a way to use their discipline and vigilance to protect the environment. The fight against the python invasion has, in many ways, become an unexpected lifeline for people who once fought different kinds of battles. While conservationists and hunters share a common goal, the ethical debate continues. Animal rights groups often criticize python removal programs for being cruel, arguing that the snakes should not be killed. But for scientists, the choice is grim but clear. If pythons are left unchecked, they will wipe out native species that cannot defend themselves. It's a painful trade-off, but one that's necessary to preserve the larger balance of the ecosystem. Every snake removed potentially saves dozens of small mammals, birds, and reptiles from extinction in that region. Even with this understanding, the emotional toll remains high. Hunters and conservationists must constantly balance compassion with practicality. Their work proves that saving an ecosystem requires not just technology and strategy, but also courage, sacrifice, and emotional strength. The robo-rabbit may be a symbol of scientific innovation, but the real heart of this fight lies in the dedication of the people willing to confront danger and moral uncertainty to protect nature. Looking ahead, the main challenge is scaling up the success. The Robo-Rabbit program showed that the technology works, but it also revealed that a few dozen robots aren't enough. To truly make an impact across the Everglades, an area spanning more than 1.5 million acres, hundreds or even thousands of these robotic lures would be needed. That means higher costs, more maintenance, and much larger support teams. Each robot costs about $4,000 to build, and running a large-scale operation would require continuous funding, something conservation programs often struggle to secure. Beyond the cost of the robots themselves, there's also the need for constant upkeep. The Everglades are tough on equipment. Heat, humidity, and water damage can quickly destroy electronics. Maintaining a fleet of robotic lures means having skilled technicians, regular inspections, and backup systems in place. Essentially, scaling up this program would turn it into a massive public infrastructure project dedicated to environmental defense. Yet many experts argue that doing nothing would cost even more. The destruction caused by the pythons, both ecological and economic, continues to grow every year. To make the investment worthwhile, the next generation of robo-rabbits must be flawless. Researchers are already working to make them more convincing, refining the scent and heat signatures so that snakes can't tell the difference between a robot and a real rabbit. The goal is to completely close the sensory gap and make the decoy irresistible to the python every single time. Engineers are also improving battery life and weatherproofing so that the robots can stay operational longer in harsh conditions. But perhaps the most powerful part of this project isn't the robots themselves, it's the data they collect. Each one acts like a sensor in a larger network, continuously feeding information about python movements and behavior into an artificial intelligence system. Over time, this data creates an incredibly detailed map of where and how the snakes live. Scientists can then predict migration patterns, identify breeding zones, and even deploy human teams more efficiently. Future plans include combining this data with drone technology. Once a robo-rabbit detects movement and sends an alert, a drone could be launched to confirm the sighting from above. track the python's movements, and guide hunters to its exact location. By combining AI analysis, aerial imaging, and robotic lures, the fight against the pythons could become faster and more precise than ever before. This system turns the Everglades into a kind of living surveillance network, where nature and technology interact in real time to restore balance.